Now it's on. Doesn't that seem impossible? To walk by faith, not by sight. My eyes often lie to me, but they're the instruments that I have to go about in this world. How am I supposed to possibly do that? Or Paul in Romans chapter 12, it's not just with generosity, but a number of the things that Paul mentions here in the way that we serve, in the capacity that we have. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 8, just notice some of the things that Paul lists here as means of service. Romans chapter 12 and verse 8, he says, back in verse 6, since we have different gifts, since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith; if service, in his serving; or he who teaches in his teaching; or he who exhorts in his exhortation; he who gives with liberality; he who leads with diligence; he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Some of those, I'll suggest to you, some of the ways that God has for us to serve, they seem impossible. These are big asks, God. Christians are often called upon to do seemingly impossible things. Now, I want you to go back to the book of Luke. Go back to the book of Luke. This is where we left off last night. Actually, we're going to go to chapter 9. I'm going to pick up the end of the story here. This is Luke chapter 9, and then we'll back up. Luke chapter 9 and verse 12, this is the feeding of the 5,000. I know we've hinted at this before from the Gospel of Mark. Look at what's said here. This is Luke chapter 9 and verse 12. Now the day was ending, and the 12 came and said to him, send the crowd away, that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside and find lodging and get something to eat. For here we are in a desolate place. We're in a wilderness. But he said to them, you give them something to eat. Does that not seem impossible? You give them something to eat. It sure seems impossible to the disciples, because they say, we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish. Unless perhaps we go and buy food for all these people. For there were about 5,000 men. And he said to his disciples, have them sit down to eat in groups of about 50 each. And they did so, and he had them all sit down. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them, and broke them, and kept giving them to the disciples to set before the people. And they all ate, and were satisfied, and the broken pieces which they had left over were picked up 12 baskets full. I think there's some significance there, right? In the number 12, each of the apostles, the ones that Jesus had just told, you give them something to eat, and each one of them picks up a full basket themselves of the leftovers. And this doesn't it? This seems impossible. When he says, you give them something to eat. Well, Jesus, how am I supposed to give all of these people something to eat? That what I've got here is probably not even enough for 2 of them. How could we possibly feed all of these people? I mean, what did Jesus really expect them to do? Did Jesus expect them to work a miracle? What did Jesus expect them to do? Jesus says, you give them something to eat. Now, was he just tricking them? Was he just toying with them so that they would have to look back to him and say, no, Jesus, we can't do it. You do it for us. Or did he seriously mean for them to do something about this? You give them something to eat. It's impossible. That's what they're saying. Jesus, this is impossible. We can't do this. Do you remember last night from Luke chapter 8 and verse 18 where Jesus says, take care how you listen? The message that Jesus had for them there is, are you paying attention, guys? Have they been paying attention? Jesus is testing them here. Have they been paying attention? My son was in the Boy Scouts for a number of years, made his Eagle Scout before he aged out. One of the things that we do in Boy Scouts is something called the EDGE method. It's a way of teaching, and EDGE stands for explain, demonstrate, guide, and then enable. And so if we have a young scout and maybe we're going to teach them how to tie a square knot, or maybe a bowline knot, or maybe a clove hitch, or any of the other hitches, 2-half hitch, or something like that. Maybe we're going to teach them how to sharpen an axe without cutting themselves. We're going to teach them to do some Boy Scouting thing. We're going to teach them how to set up a tent. And so we use the EDGE method. Another boy, actually, an older scout, one who's been in the program longer, he will go through this with the younger scout. And so he first of all explains to them, this is what we're going to do. This is how this knot is tied, or this is how the tent gets set up. He's going to explain that to them. And then he's going to show them. He demonstrates it. He sharpens the axe the way he's supposed to, or he ties the knot in front of them, or he sets the tent up. He explains it, and then he demonstrates it, and then the two of them work together to do the process. They set the tent up together. And then lastly, the older scout lets the younger scout do it himself. He enables him. I'd suggest to you that that is exactly what Jesus is doing here with the disciples. He has given them the explanation. He's walked through this with them before. They've seen all of these things. He is giving them now an opportunity. Now you do it. I've shown you. I've explained this. I've shown you all of the method. I've shown you what to do. Now you do it. Now you try. Yeah, even if you've never been in the Boy Scout program, maybe you taught someone how to tie their shoes. Do you remember learning how to tie your shoe yourself? Maybe an older parent, or maybe a parent or a grandparent or someone, maybe they demonstrated it for you and they would tie your shoelace for you, and then they have you do it. That's what Jesus is doing here. Now you guys, you do it. Let's back up to Luke chapter 8 now and pick up what has happened in the context leading up to this point. So we start here with the crux, we start here with the end, but look at the way that the story develops. What were they supposed to be paying attention to? So last night we were in Luke chapter 8. We were in Luke chapter 8. Jesus tells them, so take care how you listen, and I'm not sure that they've always been just really in paying attention. They do pay attention, but they miss some things, just like we all do. Sometimes our attention wavers. And so Jesus grabs their attention one more time with the storm on the sea. They are all really focused. They are dialed in when the storm comes up. And he rebukes them slightly when he asks them, where is your faith? When he calms the storm, when he calms the sea, and they're amazed. And they say, what kind of man? Who is this guy? And he says, where is your faith? What have you seen me doing? Let's pick up our reading then right after this. So this is verse 26. And I know there's a bit of a long reading here, but I want you to think about the events that take place in these verses. So we're going to read through the end of the chapter, beginning at verse 26. So right after the sea's calm, verse 26, they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. So they've crossed the sea. And when he came out onto the land, he was met by a man from the city who was possessed with demons, and who had not put on any clothing for a long time, and was not living in a house, but in the tombs. And seeing Jesus, he cried out and fell before him, and said with a loud voice, what business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For he had seized him many times, and he was bound with chains and shackles and kept under guard. And he would break his bonds, and he would be driven by the demon into the desert. And Jesus asked him, what is your name? And he said, Legion, for we are many demons. And he was imploring him not to command them to go away into the abyss. Now there was a herd of many swine feeding there on the mountain, and the demons implored him to permit them to enter the swine, and he gave them permission. This is verse 33. And the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. And when the herdsmen saw what had happened, they ran away and reported in the city and out in the country. And people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found a man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting down at his feet, clothed in his right mind, and they became frightened. Why would they be frightened now? Those who had seen it reported to them how the man who was demon-possessed had been made well, and all the people of the country of the Gerasenes and the surrounding district asked him to leave. Why would they want Jesus to leave? Jesus just done something really great. Why would they ask him to leave now? They asked him to leave, for they were gripped with great fear. And he got into the boat and returned. But the man from whom the demons had gone out was begging him that he might accompany him. But he sent him away, saying, "Return to your house and describe what great things God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done. Now, I just want to make a couple comments before we move on from this. This is a fascinating story, and it demonstrates something about Jesus. Here is one man, and he is standing up against an army of devils. Just picture that, right? It's one man. It's Jesus, and he is facing an army, the legion of devils. Not only that, think about the fear aspect. Imagine this man from the tombs, the demon-possessed man. Imagine you were one of the villagers. You know about that man. Right? You're afraid of that man because you have often tried to chain him, you've guarded him, you've done all kinds of things to corral him, to keep him under control, and nothing works. And here comes this naked, screaming man, right? Because that's the way he is. He is cut up, scarred over, he's a mess, and he comes running out of the graves. He comes running out of the tombs. He lives in the cemetery. Wouldn't that be a frightening sight? Some naked, screaming guy comes running out of the graveyard. Wouldn't that seem scary to you? But they're more afraid of Jesus. Why? Why wouldn't they celebrate it? You know about nuclear power? It's awesome. It can do great things, right? It can do amazing things. But what if something goes wrong? It's Superman. It's Superman. He's the hero. Look at the great things that he can do. But what if he turns on us? Jesus, please go away. We don't know what to do with your power. You've got power. Obviously, please go away. We're scared of it. We don't know what to make of it. We hardly knew what to do with this guy. You're obviously stronger than that guy. We don't know what to make of it. And so they asked Jesus to leave. And of course Jesus does, because that's his character. He doesn't force himself on anyone. That's his character. So the first story that we have is that Jesus drove out an army of demons while other people could not. The next story, there's a woman that's healed. So let's pick up our reading in verse 40. These two are actually interwoven together. And Jesus returned. The people welcomed him, for they had all been waiting for him. So some people asked him to leave. Other people were waiting to see him return. And there came a man named Jairus, who was an official of the synagogue, and he fell at Jesus' feet and began imploring him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. She was dying. Luke gives us the actual state of the girl. Mark or Matthew give us what the father says about it. The father says that she's dead. That's the way he feels about it. Luke's telling us the actual state of the girl. She was dying. But as he went, the crowds were pressing against him. And a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone. Again, nobody could control this demon-possessed man. Nobody could heal this woman. She comes up behind Jesus and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her hemorrhage was stopped. And Jesus said, "Who is the one who touched me?" And while they were all denying it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing in on you." What are you talking about, who touched you? Everybody's touching you. And Jesus said, someone did touch me, for I was aware that power had gone out from me. When the woman saw that she had not escaped notice, she came trembling and fell down before him and declared in the presence of all the people the reason why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. So here we have a woman healed that no doctor could possibly heal. And Jesus does so without even trying. She just touches him and she's healed. He doesn't even try. He doesn't have to do anything. Now back to the story with Jairus, verse 49. And while he was still speaking, someone came from the house of the synagogue official saying, your daughter has died. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. But when Jesus heard this, he answered him, do not be afraid any longer. Only believe, and she will be made well. And when he came to the house, he did not allow anyone to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the girl's father and mother. And they were all weeping and lamenting for her. But he said, stop weeping, for she has not died, but is asleep. And they began laughing at him, knowing that she was dead, or that she had died. He, however, took her by the hand and called, saying, child, wake up, child, arise. And her spirit returned, and she got up immediately, and gave orders for something to be, and he gave orders that something be given to her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he instructed them, tell no one what has happened. The third miracle, the third healing here is this little girl that Jesus raises up with no more difficulty than getting a child to wake up out of a nap. Child, wake up. Wake up, baby. It's time to get up. Just that simple. Just that easy. So you have these three miracles of healing at the end of chapter 8. Now, chapter 9, Jesus sends out the 12. So let's keep reading. So I'll tell you why we're reading. Because I believe that the sermon, the best sermon, is simply what the text says if we just allow it to speak. You have these three miracles of healing, and then Jesus sends out the 12. And notice again the things that he tells them. Luke chapter 9 and verses 1 through 11. He called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all the demons. And he gave them let me read that again. He called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all the demons. Doesn't that seem like it fits the context? Jesus just cast out a legion of demons, an army of devils. And he gives them that authority now as well to cast out demons and to heal diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to perform healing. And he said to them, take nothing for your journey, neither a staff, nor a bag, nor bread, nor money, and not even have 2 tunics apiece. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that city. And as for those who do not receive you, as you go out from the city, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. Departing, they began going through the villages, preaching the gospel and healing everyone. What are the disciples doing? They're healing people. Now Herod the Tetrarch heard of all that was happening, and he was greatly perplexed, because it was said by some that John had been risen from the dead, and some that Elijah had appeared, but others that one of the prophets of old had risen again. And Herod said, I myself had John beheaded, but who is this man about whom I hear such things? And he kept trying to see him. Verse 10 and verse 11, when the apostles returned, they gave an account to Jesus of all they had done. taking them with him, he withdrew by himself to a city called Bethsaida. But the crowds were aware of this and followed him, and welcoming them, he began speaking to them about the kingdom of God and curing those who had need of healing.